All right, so yesterday, definition that we were taking a look at here with complex sentences, because remember, we did simple sentences and we did compound. I know we already took a look at this one, but complex, you're taking a look at a dependent clause and you're taking a look at an independent clause being together. You can pretty much rest assured that when we do our quiz next week, one of the types of questions will be, here's a complex sentence. Tell me which clause is dependent, tell me which clause is independent. So you certainly do want to be aware of the differences with them and whatnot. If it's an independent clause, it could be a sentence by itself. If it's a dependent clause, like these three that we were putting down, it cannot be a sentence. So if you were to write, and remember, I think even Shai was the one mentioning it, the way you write, the way you speak would be two different things. You can't write, because Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon, and put a period and have a complete sentence. We need to know what happened because they arrived at the bus station. Or while he waited at the train station, we need to know still what is going on. So these could certainly become sentences and be parts of sentences, but the way they are right now, they can't be a complete sentence, and that's what makes them a dependent clause. You're filling in the blanks. So you're writing, so right now you'd be at the examples of dependent clauses include the following, and you'd be writing those three things down. Now, take notice. How could I make number one a complete sentence without adding anything? I'm not going to add a word. How could I make number one a sentence? Tommy? Besides adding a period and that kind of stuff.
Can we take something away?
Yes.
Just take off because.
Yeah. Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon. It'd be a simple sentence. It would be a complete sentence. But the word because is what is throwing it off. And the same thing happens with number two. While he waited at the train station, it could become a complete sentence if we took out while he waited at the train station. So a lot of times dependent clauses are dependent because of that type of conjunction that's getting used at the front. It's not a fanboys, but it's a different kind of conjunction, which we'll get into here in a little bit. So they're close to being sentences. There's just something a little bit off that is not allowing it to be complete. All right, so dependent clauses, such as those, and we just said this, can't stand alone as a sentence, but they can be added to an independent clause to form what is called a complex sentence. Complex sentences are probably the most difficult to write sometimes, but they can also be the most effective. What they do is they start off with what's considered a subordinating conjunction. That's how you can pick out a dependent clause, because it has what's called a subordinating conjunction. I'll bring that up here a little bit so you can see it better.
What? I want to do that one.
Subordination, insubordination.
I bet you can think of 3 examples of subordinating conjunctions. After. Because, why? Those would all be subordinating conjunctions, and lo and behold, what would another example be? Although. So you got a part here where at the bottom of the third page you have like a whole bunch of blanks. That's what these would be for. These are all subordinating conjunctions. After, although, as, because, before, even though, if, since, though, unless, until, when, whenever, whereas, wherever, and while, all would be considered subordinating conjunctions. Subordinating or subordinate, both terms work if you hear different ones. I'll probably use different ones from time to time.
Which one will we have?
For these,
Whereas.
whereas, no, whereas can be one. Sometimes people, whatsoever, you'll sometimes see as one word. That one should be broken up into like multiple ones. Even though is to. Even though is to. You don't want to. Tommy, I don't think there's one that like people avoid.
Whereas.
I mean, it might get used less frequent. It depends on what you're writing about. If you're doing something where you're comparing and contrasting, like that's part of the assignment, then whereas is going to get used quite a bit. Whereas it's not on here. However, could kind of be the same thing. I like the Steelers, whereas my brother, likes the Patriots. When you're doing a compare contrast, identifying something that's different, that's where whereas is going to get used. You're probably right. Of these, that's the one that's least likely used, but I don't think there's any words on here that you would go, I can't use that in a sentence. I don't know how I would do it. The nice thing about complex sentences, and I would say especially compared to compound sentences, they are very good at highlighting relationships between parts. So, although Mr. Samsa is Gregor's father, comma, what might be a sentence I would put in afterwards? He doesn't treat Gregor kindly as a human being, something along those lines. So you're kind of creating a relationship or identifying what a relationship would be within two parts in a sentence. All right, so I got 3 examples here that we're going to take a look at. Complex sentence joins the independent with one or more dependent clauses. Dependent clause can go first in the sentence, followed by an independent clause. So, if we were to have these statements, and we got these 3 sentences, we're on the next page now. The first one that you have is the dependent clause, because, while, after, which we just had, and now we got the sentence that's coming after it. If you start off with the dependent clause, what kind of punctuation do you have to include? You're going to have a comma, and I'll zoom in on that there in a little bit for you too to see. George?
Go back up so I can finish. What is on the
Yep.
complex sentence?
Right there?
What is the key clauses do
The dependent clause can go first in the sentence, followed by the independent clause. So these sentences are grammatically correct. There's nothing wrong with them. I don't know if you have had a teacher say this before. I'm not honestly sure what some folks' viewpoints are on it. Number one, some people might have gotten some flack before because sometimes people will tell you, Alex, you should never start a sentence with because. There's absolutely nothing grammatically wrong with a sentence starting with the word because. You can do it. Matt? I'll move back up to sentences then too. George, did you get what you needed? Matt, you good? Okay. Now, if Logan turned in an essay or a paragraph and every sentence started with the word because, then I'm going to let you know that, hey, you can't start every single sentence with because. But there's nothing wrong with beginning a sentence with the term because. Now, if you were to say, because Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon, period, you got a problem because you don't have a complete sentence. But the way number one's written is perfectly fine. I'm going to guess most people have number one, so I'm going to go up here a little bit. And then notice the little tip part here below. When the dependent clause comes first, a comma should be used to separate the two clauses. If you were to write number 3 without a comma, your words are fine. Grammatically, it's going to be a run-on sentence because you need a comma there to separate the two clauses. Jakez, are my sentences boring you? No. Is your friendship with Logan boring you? It's time to move on. Find new people.
Wake up.
If I were No, it doesn't look right. Noah's hair.
Yeah, no, it's her.
It's not looking right.
Looks like something.
Yes.
Eminem's ugly. Yeah, 'cause he got millions of dollars.
Finish up where we're at here with number 3 in the tip. Then we got next one we'll take a look at.
Nah, he's terrible. I don't know anyone.
All right, next part. Conversely, independent clause can also go first in the sentence, and then it would be followed by the dependent clause. So you can switch the order, have independent followed by dependent. In this case, when that happens, you do not need to have a comma. I did not see them at the station because Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon. The way that sentence is written, perfectly fine. You're starting off with a independent clause. I did not see them at the station. You're then following that with a dependent clause. Because the dependent clause comes after, no comma necessary in between. Somewhere, if a person yelled at you for not using commas enough, you've probably grown into the habit of throwing in commas all over the place, and you see the word like because, you feel like you need to throw one in. But you would not need to.
There's a lot of sentences.
Joe realized that the train was late, independent clause, while he waited at the train station. If we were doing this yesterday, we would say he was chasing the train that was late that did not arrive yet.
Whoa.
That's okay. Mary and Samantha realized that Joe was waiting at the train station, independent clause, conjunction, after they left on the bus. You don't need to worry about the underlining, just highlighting where you can see the independent clause first, followed by the dependent. No commas necessary for any of those. I like how you take your glasses off to look at stuff on the board. You can get into because and then you won't squint as much.
Hey, man.
This is like dressing in black thing.
Yeah. Why?
Down at the bottom for the tip, it simply just says then when the independent clause comes first, a comma should not be used to separate, so you would just be writing in independent.
How much are we gonna write?
Look, we were at 4 yesterday.
There's no way. This is way more.
And Tommy, did we complain? No.
Not one time.
I don't complain.
You just voice your displeasure.
I'm just stating a fact.
You just
There's a lot to write.
I picture Thanksgiving dinner and then you going, you know what, it'd be nice if there was a little bit more salt and pepper on the table for my turkey. Stuffing's good, but you know what, it's better when so-and-so makes it.
Eating all it, and then I take a nap.
Who took all the cranberry sauce? I didn't get any.
Oh, I'd be super mad. as
Pumpkin
hell.
pie? We don't eat pumpkin pie. Let's have chocolate cake.
What?
Exactly. But he would still be complaining.
No, I wouldn't. Because I'd make it.
The Jello or like the real cranberries or both? I don't like any.
I do like craisins.
Yeah.
Yeah, those nasty watermelon. Uh-huh. Taste like a watermelon gum.
Okay. All right, couple things here. Complex sentences. Oftentimes more effective than compound sentences because with the complex you get a clear, more specific relationship between the main parts of the sentence. So the word before, for instance, tells readers that one thing is going to happen in relation to another. This is a lot better than just having and, or, so, but, that kind of stuff happening. So complex sentences, more effective, especially when you're looking at relationship, how one part impacts another, how symbolism could impact a theme, how the action of one character could have a effect on another character, that kind of stuff. So that's when complex sentences become really good. Within like the essays that we write, if you were to do a topic sentence, the first sentence of the paragraph, it's probably going to be a simple sentence. When you get into the analysis, the importance of things, that's when it'll probably turn complex. Because that's when you're going to highlight the relationship and all that kind of stuff. And so, as mentioning here, a word such as although, that can convey a more complex relationship as opposed to something like and, or, so, but, that kind of stuff. And it was mentioning this stuff here, beginning sentence with and or because, what kind of ends up being the rules for it? Should you begin a sentence with and or but? Simple answer, short answer would be no. Stay away with using the regular conjunctions and or so but, other coordinating conjunctions to start off sentences. That's not really going to be the appropriate language, word choice to use. Plus, it's also probably going to get rather repetitive over and over and over again. So the big thing here, key word that you're writing, you should avoid beginning a sentence with those terms. They can certainly be used to join things together, but not to begin, in other words, you're writing in a brand new sentence. Let's get through, we're almost done with this.
Well, that, yeah, I was going to
And then, yeah, when we're done.
This page.
You should have heard what Mr. Snyder said about me today. It's out of nowhere.
Oh, it's hilarious.
I didn't even do anything. You started it.
He complains, and then he wants us to worry about him. However, such sentences could be used effectively if you might be trying to emphasize something. So and I would think the word but would be the one that you would use most often. If you're really trying to emphasize some kind of point, you might begin the sentence with but. And probably not, unless you're making a list of things that you have to do. I need to go home and do my homework, and then I have to go to work, and then I have to help with, whatever chores around the house. That and might then get used to kind of emphasize.
Can't wait to eat Thanksgiving.
We had what? You should avoid. You mean for like beginning sentences with and or because? You should begin. Should you begin a sentence? Next one is the short answer is no. You should avoid. And then the last one is not to begin a new sentence. So begin, avoid, begin. And then we just wrote in effectively for the however one. And then the last one, and I know I already said this to you, there is nothing wrong with using the word because to start a sentence. So should you start a sentence with because, there's nothing wrong with it. There's not anything grammatically wrong. You might be told not to start with because to avoid sentence fragments, since that could certainly happen, or because people are afraid that you're going to start to overuse them. But from a English, grammar, grammatical standpoint, nothing wrong with it. So next year, when Mrs. Trainer tells you, or Mr. Kern, you can't do that, then you go an independent clause. I can use it because Mr. King said so. I'll defend you to the death. No, because that's good.
Disrespectful stuff.
Any blanks that people have that we need to fill in? Where? Okay. I'll let you borrow that. What is it with you folks on the first page?
It's like the second sentence, I think.
He said, no. No.
It's,
Common weakness.
I'm gonna.
essential sentence has the most basic element. No, it's the one before that.
Here's the first page. Common weakness in writing is lack of simple, compound, and complex.
Simple, compound, and complex.
All right. This is practice. We're doing this together. And if you were not here yesterday, this might help reinforce. Put your notes away, because I don't want you looking at stuff while we go through this. Again, it's not graded.
It's okay. How many of those like circle like stickies?
No, I know what you mean, but no, I don't. And I don't honestly know anyone who does.
Mr. So does. I got away a little bit.
All right, so at the top here, identifying coordinating conjunctions. Tyler, give me like 2. Go in any order you want. All right, so we have, there we go. For, F-O-R, and you said and. Okay. A-N-D. George, remember 2 more? Nor, yep. N-O-R. Tommy? But, or, and then we got 2 more. Yet and so. So coordinating conjunctions, what type of sentence do we associate these with? Simple, compound, complex? Compound, okay? So these are getting used for a compound sentence because remember, essentially what you're doing with these is you're linking together 2 simple sentences. I am not going to eat dinner for the next 2 days, comma, for I want to have a lot of room in my tummy for Thursday. I'm joining together 2 things. I'm using a coordinating conjunction. Thanksgiving is the best meal of the year, but I don't like the cranberry sauce. 2 simple sentences, joining them together. If I use a coordinating conjunction, what kind of punctuation do I need to go along with it? I need to make sure I have a comma. And the comma goes before the coordinating conjunction. All right? Identify at least 3 subordinate or subordinating conjunctions. So what would be subordinate conjunctions that we just wrote a list of them that we could use for dependent clauses in like a complex sentence? Then? No, because those are our coordinating. These are the ones for the dependent clauses. So like after could be an example. Although, yep, that could be one. Because, and certainly there's more than 3, whereas, whenever, while, until, all of those things would be considered subordinate conjunctions. Okay? Now, for these, we're saying they're all sentences. We're just identifying, is it simple, is it compound, is it complex? After school, Layla made a stop at Starbucks. This one's a little tricky. What do you think, George? You're right, it's not compound. It's going to come down to simple or complex. How many want to go simple? Angelina's going simple.
It was just Layla made a stop at Starbucks.
Simple. Purposely started you with a tricky one. Sorry, George. And what I was expecting, and again, not meant to like try to trap you, I was expecting folks would go complex because wait a minute, there's that coordinating conjunction after, after school. If I were to just have this as a sentence, Layla made a stop at Starbucks, that's a complete sentence. If I were to say after school, that's not a complete sentence. By definition, complex sentence, what kind of clauses are you joining together? Complex sentence means I have an independent clause and I have a dependent clause. For it to be a dependent clause, you have to have both a noun and a verb. I have a noun, school. I don't have a verb. This is technically just called a prepositional phrase. I'm going back to like 8th grade now with all this stuff, okay? So this is simply, and I'm not going to worry about getting into gerunds and prepositional phrases and participle phrases and all that kind of stuff. But for it to be a complex sentence, I would need to have a noun and a verb with after. If the sentence was after she went to school, comma, Layla made a stop at Starbucks, complex. Because after she went to school, I have both a noun and a verb in that phrase. So this one's simple. So a simple sentence doesn't mean it's like 3 words long. It just means that you have one independent clause. How about this one? The dog chased the rabbit after it caught a mole. Ben, what do you think? That one is complex. It's not compound. I don't have a comma. I don't have a coordinating conjunction. I do have that word again showing up that we just had in the last one after. What is my subject? It. What did it do? It caught. So therefore I have an independent clause. The dog chased the rabbit. I have a dependent clause. They're together. Complex. Why don't I need a comma? Because my independent clause is first. About number 3. While watching TV, Jake unsuccessfully attempted to study for his world history test. It's a lengthy one, but it is simple. How about this one? While his brother watched TV in the other room, Jake studied for his world history test. That one is complex. Which would you say? Not compound. Complex. Because if I were to take this phrase, while his brother watched TV in the other room, that by itself isn't a complete sentence. It's a dependent clause. But you can kind of see what's the difference between a lengthy or simple sentence and a complex one. While watching TV, I don't have a subject. I don't know who's watching TV, so it's still part of this sentence. Here, I know the brother watched TV. Dependent clause, independent clause, Jake studied for his world history test. I can't go out tonight, for I didn't get enough of my homework done during my 2 study halls today. George? Compound, what's the coordinating conjunction? 4. That one that we were like, when in the world would you use that one? This would be an example. When I don't have to go to school, I enjoy watching movies and playing football. Complex. Stephanie and Marissa each spent $170 at 3 different stores in the mall. Simple. Again, it's a lengthy, simple sentence, but it's still a simple sentence. I just received my paycheck, yet I don't have enough money to go to the movies with my friends.
What?
Compound. And again, we got that conjunction right there of yet.
You got $10 an hour.
They're in some debt. I had to pay off their stuff. I became ill after I ate 3 dozen chicken wings in 24 minutes, period. Then I went to Allegheny General for my appendectomy. No, I did not do that. Well, I did, but not for that reason.
I said simple.
No, it's simple.
There's no
Not that other
comma.
sentence.
It's a lot of wings in a short amount of time.
It's complex
That's a
because
bad
it's
idea
more
already.
in depth with what's going on.
Well, it's more in depth. The key thing that you want to look for: do I have number one a coordinate conjunction? Do I have a fan, boys? No, and I don't have a comma. I know I don't therefore have a compound sentence. Next thing, do I have a subordinate clause? In this case, you do, and I think it was one of the ones that we wrote up at the top. I have after. Now, since I have after, I want to look to see at what comes after after. Do I have a subject and an action? It should say ate, not at, my mistake. I ate 3 dozen wings in 24 minutes. That is a dependent clause because the word after goes with it. After I ate 3 dozen wings in 24 minutes, we need to know what happened. What happened? I became ill. So this is a complex sentence.
You got me.
Does that make sense? Again, assuming it says at or ate as opposed to at. All right, so here, we're not saying sentences, we're going clauses. Are these independent, where it could be a sentence on its own, or is it dependent, where it would still need help? So after Mr. Kane was done teaching the lesson.
Independent. Because if you're answering the question.
Yeah, but we got to think of this not as like if I were answering something, like verbally saying it. If I was writing it, this is going to be dependent. I had time to start my homework. Independent. Even though the sun was out. Dependent. It began raining. Oops, this morning. What I do?
Are we turning this in?
No, this is going to kind of be like a study guide for later.
The next one.
I ate 3 hot dogs and 2 hamburgers, so we're breaking our routine of every other.
Yep.
I wrote this before dinner time. Because I was hungry, dependent. Now you take a look at them, and all those pairs could certainly be written together as a sentence. After Mr. Kane was done teaching the lesson, I had time, comma, I had time to start my homework. Even though the sun was out, comma, it began raining this morning. I ate 3 hot dogs and 2 hamburgers because I was hungry, no comma needed. Now we're going. These are complex sentences. Which one's the independent clause? Which one is the dependent clause? So Gregor was alienated and dehumanized when Mr. Samsa threw apples at him.
Mr. Sanchez.
Alex, what do you think? Give me one of them.
The Gregor was alienated, dehumanized, that's independent.
Okay, so you're going independent here, and then you would be going dependent there. With when? Yes. 27, after he picked up his sister at school, Tyler, I wasn't writing about you. Tyler stopped at Giant Eagle for some groceries. Devin? Independent? Okay. And so that would mean the first part is dependent, and I got a comma separating the two. I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving because it will be my first day off from work in over a week. Jillian?
The first one I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving is independent.
Okay. And then because it will be my first day off from work in over a week.
Cranberry sauce, straight from the can.
Your quiz on Wednesday, not the day we come back. It will not be this exact same sheet of paper, but those types of questions is what is going to be on there. On Tuesday when we come back, we're going to do some little writing stuff, just kind of as practice so you get the feel for it before we end up taking the quiz on Wednesday. So, Luke, no homework points finished at all, but certainly look over it because that's the type of stuff that we'll be doing on Wednesday. Have a good break. Enjoy it.
I hope you don't say that. I hope you not.